The envelope is thin. Cheap paper. Folded once. Carefully addressed. Inside, a complaint. The elevator in the building hasn't worked for 3 months. An elderly neighbor cannot leave her apartment. The district office has been notified twice. Nothing changed. So he writes again. He uses formal language. He references housing regulations. He includes dates. He avoids anger. Weeks later, a reply arrives. Not a solution. A confirmation. Stamped in blue ink. Received. Registered. For review. The paper carries a reference number. It acknowledges the issue. The elevator remains broken. From the outside, this looks like indifference. But this was not the only letter written that month. In another district, a different citizen writes. This time, the tone shifts. He describes shortages in the local grocery store. He mentions repeated absence of basic goods. He asks whether distribution targets are being met. He does not insult the system. But he questions its efficiency. His reply also arrives. Stamped. Registered. Filed. 2 envelopes. 2 problems. 2 confirmations. And 2 separate journeys inside the same machine. In the Soviet Union, complaint writing was not hidden behavior. It was structured behavior. Factories displayed boards encouraging workers to report inefficiencies. Housing committees held designated letter days. Regional newspapers printed selected grievances to demonstrate transparency. Writing was framed as civic duty. If something failed, you wrote. If management miscalculated, you wrote. If goods did not arrive, you wrote. By the late 1970s, internal administrative summaries recorded millions of citizen letters annually across the Soviet Union. Some ministries received tens of thousands each month. Entire departments existed solely to process correspondence. Clerks did not read randomly. They followed procedure. Envelope opened. Content logged. Subject classified. Region noted. Institution referenced. Each letter generated metadata. Name. Address. Occupation. Affiliated organization. Subject category. Tone. Tone was never publicly discussed. But it was recorded. In a centrally planned economy, information did not move through price signals. There were no fluctuating markets to indicate dissatisfaction. Instead, pressure surfaced through writing. Complaint letters functioned as pressure indicators. A spike in housing complaints in one district. A rise in supply grievances tied to a specific distribution center. Repeated references to the same factory manager. These were not isolated stories. They were aggregated signals. Monthly reports summarized them. Quarterly summaries compared regions. Some ministries tracked increases as percentages. Not to publish. To anticipate instability. Because instability rarely begins with protest. It begins with repetition. The complaint system transformed repetition into measurable pattern. And once measurable, it could be managed. Inside administrative buildings, complaint letters moved beyond the stamp. They entered categorization. The process was procedural. A clerk assigned a primary subject code. Infrastructure. Supply. Personnel. Housing. Administrative misconduct. Then secondary notation. Local error. Distribution delay. Execution failure. Ideological tone. That last category never appeared on the citizen's copy. But internally, tone mattered. A complaint that described a broken elevator as temporary negligence was routine. A complaint that described chronic shortages as evidence of systemic incompetence was not. Words were underlined. Phrases were transcribed into internal summaries. If multiple letters used similar language in a short period, they were grouped. Grouping created clusters. Clusters triggered reviews. Not public investigations. Internal reviews. Sometimes the response was practical. A repair directive issued. A shipment redirected. A local official reprimanded. But sometimes the response was informational. The district was marked as sensitive. The factory labeled as unstable. The correspondent name cross-referenced in other files. Not for immediate punishment. For mapping. The complaint registry became interconnected with other administrative systems. Personnel files. Workplace reports. Party membership records. A single envelope could now connect to broader data. The system did not treat every critic as a threat. It treated patterns as indicators. A lone complaint could be ignored. A pattern required observation. An observation required documentation. Documentation required storage. Rows of cabinets. Numbered folders. Cross-indexed entries. The complaint did not disappear. It entered a network. Before a complaint reached the archive shelves, it often passed through a reporting cycle. At the end of each month, departments compiled summaries. Columns. Totals. Subject categories. One line might read: Housing, 1,842 letters. Supply, 3,117 letters. Transportation, 642 letters. Beside each category, a comparison. Previous month. Same month last year. Percentage increase. The individual letters were no longer visible. Only volume remained. Certain phrases were sometimes quoted internally. Not full paragraphs. Just fragments. Persistent shortage. Unacceptable delay. Repeated complaint. These fragments appeared inside administrative summaries stripped of context. The writer's tone dissolved. The narrative compressed. The complaint transformed. From description to entry to count to trend. If the housing column rose sharply in one region, a notation followed. Monitor execution. If supply grievances clustered around one distribution center. Review logistics chain. Not reform. Review. Not correction. Observation. The system did not deny the problem. It reframed it. The broken elevator was no longer a machine on the 4th floor. It became part of a housing metric. The grocery shortage was no longer an empty shelf. It became part of a supply variance. By the time the envelope reached permanent storage, it had already been translated. From voice to category to statistic. When shortages intensified in the late 1970s and early 1980s, complaint volume increased. Longer lines. More empty shelves. More delayed repairs. More letters. Internal summaries began to show upward curves. Certain regions reported sustained increases in supply grievances. Housing complaints doubled in some urban districts. Transportation delays became recurring themes. The system responded administratively. Additional clerks were assigned. Filing protocols refined. Summary frequency increased. The rise in complaints did not automatically produce reform. It produced reporting. Reports moved upward. District to regional. Regional to ministerial. Ministerial to central committees. At each level, numbers replaced names. The broken elevator became a statistic. The grocery shortage became a percentage. The correspondent became an entry. Pressure was translated into data. And data is less volatile than frustration. The act of writing substituted the act of assembling. The stamped confirmation substituted escalation. The citizen waited for response. But the system had already responded. By absorbing the signal. By integrating the complaint into its architecture. The blue stamp did not promise resolution. It confirmed incorporation. Received. The problem entered the registry. Registered. The pattern entered the summary. Filed. The pressure entered storage. The elevator might still not move. The shelf might still be empty. But the dissatisfaction was no longer external. It was internalized. Contained inside cabinets. Contained inside reports. Contained inside the system. Nothing happened to the elevator. Everything happened to the letter.